The airport terminal buzzed around me like static. I stood near gate 47, boarding pass clenched between my teeth, juggling my carry-on and phone charger when my phone exploded with notifications. 3 WhatsApp messages from an unknown number. The first was a video file. I pressed play and watched shaky footage of my land, my 10 acres, being filmed by strangers. A woman's voice narrated a final walkthrough before tomorrow's closing. My stomach twisted into knots. The second message was a DocuSign link with a contract already stamped by a notary. The third made my knees weak. In the background of the video, I heard my mother's voice, calm and rehearsed, telling someone off camera, "Our daughter gave us power of attorney before she left for her fellowship." My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I tapped the contract attachment with trembling fingers. The so-called power of attorney had my name typed neatly at the bottom, a signature that looked nothing like mine, and a date from 2 weeks ago when I was giving a lecture in Prague. I had passport stamps to prove it. I scrolled frantically to find the buyer's phone number listed on the purchase agreement and dialed immediately. My finger trembled as I pressed call. A man answered on the second ring. "Hello, this is Malik Rahman." His voice was professional, slightly confused by the unknown number calling him. "I'm calling about the property sale scheduled for tomorrow," I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "I'm Amara Okafor, and I own that land. I never authorized any sale." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The airport announcements faded into background noise as I waited for his response. Then Malik said something that made the entire terminal spin around me like a carousel. "Wait. Amara? Did you say Okafor?" Another pause, longer this time. "We've spoken before, haven't we? I handled your boundary correction last year on this exact parcel." My breath caught in my throat. The buyer's lawyer was my former property attorney. The same man who helped me update the legal description when the county adjusted the survey lines 8 months ago. "Malik, I never signed anything," I said urgently. "That power of attorney is forged. I was in Prague on the date it claims I signed." I heard him exhale slowly, a long breath that seemed to carry the weight of understanding. "Then we have a serious problem," he said quietly. "And I have a conflict of interest. I can't represent the buyer if you're contesting this sale. This is your property, and I helped you establish that last year." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Malik's voice dropped to almost a whisper, and I had to press the phone harder against my ear to hear him over the airport noise. "Listen carefully, Amara. I can't represent the buyer anymore now that I know you're contesting this. I have to withdraw from the case immediately. It's an ethics violation for me to continue." My heart continued to pound against my ribs. "What happens to the sale?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "It should stop," he said carefully. "But they're moving fast. Escrow is already open, and the title company has processed most of the paperwork. Tomorrow's closing might still happen if no one stops it." He paused again, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Before I officially step back and notify everyone of my withdrawal, I'm going to tell you 2 things. Write these down right now." I fumbled frantically for a pen in my bag, dumping half the contents on the airport floor. I finally found one and scribbled on the back of my boarding pass. "The escrow number is 2847B. The notary who stamped that power of attorney is named Patricia Nwosu." I wrote both down with shaking hands. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, confused by his willingness to help. "Because something smells very wrong here," Malik replied firmly. "And because I helped you with that boundary issue. I know you're the rightful owner. This doesn't sit right with me." Malik hung up before I could thank him properly. I immediately called the escrow company, reading the number from my boarding pass. A woman answered on the third ring and identified herself as the escrow officer, Mrs. Chukwu. "We have all the documents," she said cautiously when I explained who I was. "Including a notarized power of attorney from your parents." I asked her to email me the power of attorney immediately, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with my request. "I'm not sure I should send confidential documents," she started. "It's a document with my forged signature," I interrupted. "Send it now, or I'll report this entire transaction as fraud." She agreed quickly after that. 30 seconds later, the PDF appeared in my inbox. I opened it with shaking hands, nearly dropping my phone twice. The document was a complete disaster. The signature was a clumsy attempt to mimic mine, the loops too wide, the slant all wrong, nothing like my actual handwriting. Worse, the date was stamped for exactly 2 weeks ago. I opened my photo gallery with trembling fingers and found what I needed. Screenshots of my airline boarding passes, hotel check-in confirmation in Prague, and a photo of me standing in front of Charles Bridge with a clear timestamp and date visible. I was 3,000 miles away on the date that signature was supposedly witnessed by a notary. I quickly screenshotted everything and created a single PDF file, my fingers moving frantically across the screen. Then I typed a short email to Mrs. Chukwu, the escrow officer. The attached documents prove I was out of the country on the date of the alleged signing. This power of attorney is fraudulent, and any sale based on it is void. I hit send and waited, watching the screen anxiously. 2 minutes later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Okafor," Mrs. Chukwu said carefully, her voice tight with tension. "I need to ask you something important. Who provided this power of attorney to our office?" I already knew the answer in my gut, but hearing it out loud still felt like a physical punch to my stomach. "Your parents submitted it," she said slowly. "They brought it to our office in person last week." The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom, calling my boarding group. I stood frozen in place, staring at my phone screen. My parents had forged my signature. My parents had tried to sell my land without my knowledge or permission. My parents had lied to a title company, a realtor, and an innocent buyer. I typed a fast email to Mrs. Chukwu, my fingers shaking so badly I had to retype several words. "I am the recorded owner of this property. Deed number 2019-4471, recorded August 14, 2019. I contest any claimed authority to sell." I continued typing frantically as the final boarding call echoed through the terminal. "Please place a hold on this file immediately and note that the buyer's attorney, Malik Rahman, has withdrawn due to conflict of interest." I attached a copy of my recorded deed that I kept in my cloud storage and the prior survey Malik had helped me file last year. Then I added one more line, making sure my message was crystal clear. Cloud the title. "I will pursue all legal remedies available under the law." I pressed send just as the gate agent announced the absolute final call for my flight. The escrow officer replied within seconds, her message short and professional. "File flagged. Hold placed. Status now shows claims adverse to current transaction." I boarded the plane with my phone still buzzing constantly in my hand. A new message lit up the screen before I could even find my seat. It was from my mother, her name appearing on my screen like a ghost. "We should talk as a family." I didn't respond to my mother's message. Instead, I opened the family group chat while finding my seat on the plane, my carry-on shoved haphazardly in the overhead bin. My father had already posted a message an hour earlier that I'd somehow missed. "We're securing the homestead for everyone. This is what's best for the family's future." My cousin Chioma had replied with 3 clapping emojis. My aunt had sent a heart. No one had questioned anything at all. I took a screenshot of every message in the family chat, my hands still trembling with anger and disbelief. Then I typed my own reply, keeping it simple and direct. "Who forged my signature on the power of attorney?" The chat went completely silent for 10 long seconds. Then my mother's typing bubble appeared at the bottom of the screen. "You're being dramatic, Amara. You told us we could explore offers if something good came along." I stared at the screen in complete disbelief. I had never said that. Not once in my entire life. My father chimed in next, his message appearing below my mother's. "We're doing this for the whole family. You'll understand when it's done." I took another screenshot and forwarded the entire conversation to my friend Jade Fisher, an attorney back home in Lagos. She replied immediately, even though it was late at night where she was. Do not engage further. Save everything. I'm calling you in 5 minutes. Jade called while I was still buckling my seatbelt, the plane filling up around me with other passengers. First things first, she said in her sharp courtroom voice that I'd heard her use during trials. We file a lease pendens to cloud the title. That puts the world on notice that the property is in dispute. Second, we request a temporary restraining order to stop any transfer. Third, you file a formal complaint with the notary board against Patricia Nwosu. I grabbed my laptop from my bag and opened it on the tray table, ignoring the flight attendant's look. Tell me exactly what to write, I said to Jade, my fingers poised over the keyboard. Jade dictated 3 separate emails with precise legal language. The first was to the state notary board with my passport stamps attached as evidence. The second was to the county recorder's office requesting an emergency lease pendens filing to cloud the title. The third was a demand letter to the title company putting them on notice of the fraud. I typed everything she said, word for word, copying the legal phrases exactly. Send all 3 before takeoff, Jade instructed firmly. We need a paper trail starting right now, tonight. I hit send on all 3 emails just as the flight attendant approached and asked me firmly to switch to airplane mode. The notary complaint went through successfully. A confirmation email popped up on my screen just before I lost connection. Complaint received. Case number 2024-0891. Investigation opened. 20 minutes into the flight, I turned on the expensive in-flight Wi-Fi and checked my email again nervously. A new message had arrived from the realtor handling the sale. Her name was Blessing Adeyemi, and her profile picture showed a woman with a bright smile. Her tone was sweet and sticky like honey poured over lies. Dear Amara, your parents mentioned you're difficult to reach right now and that this sale is in everyone's best interest. Blessing continued in her email, the buyer has already scheduled the closing for tomorrow morning at 10. I'm sure we can all work together to make this smooth and professional. I read the email twice, anger rising in my chest like a flame. Then I typed a reply, keeping my tone cold and professional. Ms. Adeyemi, please send me a copy of the seller declaration form my parents signed. I need to see exactly what they swore to under penalty of perjury. I kept my words measured and precise. She responded within minutes, her tone shifting slightly. I'm not sure that's necessary. Everything is in order according to our records. I replied immediately, not giving her time to think. Send it now, or I will file a complaint with the Real Estate Commission for facilitating a fraudulent transaction. 5 minutes later, a PDF landed in my inbox with a thud. I opened it with shaking hands and felt my blood turn to ice. My parents had signed a declaration swearing under oath that I had given them full authority to sell the property. They had put their signatures on a legal document knowing it was a complete lie. When the plane landed after what felt like the longest flight of my life, I called home immediately. My mother answered on the second ring and immediately put me on speakerphone without asking. I could hear pots clanking in the background, chairs scraping across the floor, the familiar sounds of their kitchen. My father's voice joined my mother's, both of them together like they'd planned this conversation. Amara, let's talk about this calmly, he said in that measured tone. His calm was the most frightening thing I had ever heard from him. It was the voice he used when he had already decided something and expected everyone else to simply follow along. You forged my signature, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. That's a crime. A felony. My mother jumped in quickly, her words smooth and practiced. We built that land with our own hands years ago. You only kept the title because of paperwork. Her words were so rehearsed I could tell she'd been preparing this speech. It's in my name, I said firmly. Grandmother gave it to me. I bought out your share with my own money. You both signed off on it legally. Silence filled the line for several long seconds. Then my mother's voice turned cold and sharp. Don't be dramatic, Amara. This is family business, not a legal matter. I heard my father mutter something in the background I couldn't quite make out. My hands trembled as I held the phone tightly. Jade had texted me during the call with an update. Tarot hearing possible Friday morning. Be ready to appear by Zoom. The next morning, I received an email from Patricia Nwosu, the notary who'd stamped the fraudulent document. Her message was brief and defensive, clearly trying to protect herself. Patricia's email read, "I witnessed the signer via remote video notarization. Everything was done according to state guidelines and regulations." I replied immediately, not wasting any time. Please provide the video recording of the session as required by law for all remote notarizations. She didn't respond for 3 long hours. When she finally wrote back, her tone had shifted noticeably. "I need to check my files carefully. I'll get back to you soon." I forwarded the exchange to Jade, who called me within minutes of reading it. "Push harder," she said firmly. "Remote notarizations require recordings by law. If she doesn't have one, she's in serious violation." I sent another email to Patricia, making the stakes clear. Falsifying notary records is a felony offense. If the recording doesn't exist, you need to notify the state board immediately. 10 minutes later, Patricia replied with a single sentence that made my heart race. "There is no recording. I made an error in judgment." Jade actually laughed when I read it to her over the phone. "That's a confession in writing. Forward it to me right now." I attached Patricia's email to the motion Jade was preparing for the court. She added a note in the filing that made me smile. Pattern of fraud established by notary's own admission. By Thursday afternoon, the title company called me directly, Mrs. Chukwu's voice strained with tension. "Ms. Okafor, given the lease pendants you filed and the conflict notice from the buyer's former attorney, we've paused all disbursements completely." Mrs. Chukwu continued, "The buyer is very upset about the delay. Their lender is reconsidering the loan approval entirely." I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply for the first time in 2 days. "Thank you," I said quietly, meaning it. "You're doing the right thing by stopping this." She hesitated before speaking again. "Your parents have called our office 4 times today already. They're insisting everything is fine and that you'll come around eventually." I felt anger rise sharply in my chest again. "Do not release any funds under any circumstances. Do not proceed with closing. I will hold your company personally liable if you do." She agreed quickly and hung up. 10 minutes later, a blocked number called my phone. I almost didn't answer, my finger hovering over the decline button. When I finally did answer, a familiar voice filled my ear. It was my uncle, Benson, speaking in his slow, syrupy tone. "Amara, sweetheart," he said like we were old friends. "Why don't you withdraw this lease pendants nonsense? We'll take care of you later, I promise. You're making your parents look very bad in front of everyone." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Which later, do you mean, Uncle Benson? The one after the property is sold and the money is spent, or the one where I never see the land again?" He sighed heavily, clearly frustrated with my response. "You're being difficult and childish. This isn't how family operates. We take care of each other." I could hear voices in the background of Uncle Benson's call. My mother was saying something I couldn't quite make out clearly. "Family doesn't forge signatures," I said firmly. "Family doesn't lie to title companies and notaries." Uncle Benson's voice hardened noticeably. "You'll regret making this public, Amara. People are already talking about you throughout the community." I hung up without responding, my hands shaking with anger. I immediately sent a message to Mrs. Chukwu at the escrow company. Contact with coercion noted. Please document that family members are pressuring me to withdraw legal claims. She replied with a simple acknowledgement within minutes. That evening, my mother sent me a photo that made my stomach drop. It was a letter I had written when I was 19 years old, during a rough semester in university when I was struggling badly with money and stress. The letter was addressed to my parents in my younger handwriting. One line read, "If anything happens to me, please help with the land." My mother had underlined the word, help, in thick red ink. I stared at the photo of the old letter on my phone screen. My mother's message below it said, "You gave us permission years ago. This is what you wanted back then." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. That letter was from a dark time in my life, written in desperation when I thought I might have to drop out of school entirely. The letter had nothing to do with selling the land at all. It was a plea for emotional support during a difficult time, not a legal directive to sell my property. I opened my banking app and pulled up old records, scrolling back through years of transactions. In August 2019, I had transferred money to my parents' account with the memo line reading clearly, "Land buyout final payment." I took a screenshot and sent it to my mother without any additional comment. "This is the proof I bought you out. You signed a quitclaim deed. Stop pretending you have any claim." She didn't respond to my message. My father did instead. "You're tearing this family apart over dirt and memories." I didn't reply to him either. Instead, I forwarded everything to Jade immediately. She called me an hour later, her voice energized. "They're desperate now. That's actually good for us. Desperate people make mistakes and leave evidence." She was absolutely right about that. The next morning, I received a voicemail from Malik Rahman that surprised me. He had officially withdrawn from representing the buyer, but he left me a message anyway, clearly bending some rules. "Amara, I'm out of this case now completely, but I noticed something important while reviewing the files. The seller declarations your parents signed have inconsistent dates throughout. One form says the sale was authorized in June. Another says August. Also, the survey they submitted still references your 2023 boundary correction that I helped with. That legal description mismatch will absolutely kill the deal with any competent lender." Jade smiled when I played her Malik's voicemail over the phone. "That's pure gold for our case. A mismatched legal description means the title is unclear. No legitimate lender will touch it." She added Malik's observations to the motion for the temporary restraining order we were filing. "We're going to staple this to the judge's eyeballs," she said with satisfaction. That night, my younger cousin Ivy sent me a private message on Instagram that caught my attention. "Amara, I need to tell you something important. Can we talk?" I called her immediately, my heart racing. Ivy was only 22, still in school, and she had always been the kindest person in the entire family. "What's going on?" I asked gently when she answered. Her voice trembled on the other end. "Andy told everyone at dinner tonight that if you keep making noise, they'll just close the sale quietly and deal with you later. She said once the money is transferred, you'll have no choice but to accept it." My chest tightened with anger. "Ivy, can you send me a voice recording if they say anything like that again?" She hesitated, clearly conflicted. "I don't want to betray the family. They'll be so angry if they find out." I softened my tone immediately. "You're not betraying anyone. You're telling the truth. That's different." The next evening, Ivy sent me an audio file that made my hands shake. I could hear glasses clinking, laughter, and then my mother's voice, clear as day. "Once it's sold, she'll accept it. She always does eventually." I saved the audio file with trembling hands and sent it to Jade immediately. "Exhibit F," she replied within seconds. "This is motive. Do first, apologize later." Classic pattern. The TRO hearing was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 via Zoom. I set up my laptop in a quiet corner of my apartment and logged in 5 minutes early, my heart pounding. The judge appeared on screen, an older woman with sharp eyes and absolutely no patience for nonsense. Jade joined from her office, looking professional and prepared. My parents appeared on a separate screen with their own lawyer, a man I didn't recognize at all. The judge reviewed the exhibits quickly but thoroughly. My recorded deed with my name clearly listed. My passport stamps proving I was out of the country on the alleged signing date. Patricia Nwosu's written confession that no notarization recording existed. The seller declarations with inconsistent dates that contradicted each other. Malik's withdrawal letter citing conflict of interest and ethics violations. The voice memo of my mother saying they'd closed the sale anyway. My mother stared into her camera like she was being personally attacked by everyone. The judge's eyebrows climbed higher with each document she reviewed. Finally, she spoke in a clear, firm voice. I am granting a temporary restraining order. No transfer of this property may occur pending a full hearing on the merits. All funds currently in escrow are frozen immediately. The judge continued speaking, her voice cutting through the Zoom audio like a sharp blade. Furthermore, I am deeply troubled by the evidence of forgery and the notary's admission of improper procedure, the judge said sternly. The court will be forwarding this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal review. My father's face went pale on the screen, all color draining away. My mother leaned forward, about to speak, but her attorney placed a hand on her arm and shook his head firmly. The judge dismissed the hearing, and the Zoom call ended abruptly. I sat in silence, staring at the blank screen for several minutes. Jade called me immediately, her voice excited. That was a clean win. They can't touch the property now at all. 2 hours later, I received an email from the buyer's lender. They were withdrawing their loan commitment entirely due to title defects and unresolved legal claims. The buyer's new attorney, someone I'd never heard of before, sent a follow-up message requesting mutual cancellation of the purchase agreement. I forwarded both emails to Jade immediately. Do I agree to cancel? I asked. Not yet, she said firmly. We don't settle until the fraud is fully adjudicated. Let them sweat and worry. The sale collapsed completely by Monday. No financing, no closing, no transfer of any kind. It was just me, my parents, and a courtroom date scheduled in 3 weeks. I flew home the following week for the final proceedings. My parents demanded a face-to-face meeting before court. We need to talk like adults, my father said over the phone, his voice tight. I agreed to meet them at their house, but I came prepared for anything. I placed my phone face down on the kitchen table, recording audio the entire time without them knowing. My mother sat across from me, arms crossed defensively. My father stood near the stove, gripping the counter tightly. You owe us respect, he started, his voice heavy with expectation. I pulled a certified copy of my deed from my bag and set it on the table between us carefully. Respect goes both ways, I said quietly but firmly. My mother reached for the paper immediately. I slid it back toward me quickly. This land is mine. Grandmother gave it to me because she trusted me to keep her promise. I bought you out with my own money. You signed off legally. This is not up for debate or discussion. My father's jaw tightened visibly. We raised you. We fed you. We put you through school and paid for everything. I met his eyes directly. And I'm grateful for all of that. But gratitude doesn't mean I hand over my property because you want to sell it for your own reasons. My mother's voice turned sharp and cutting. You'll regret making this public, Amara. People are already talking about you throughout the entire community. I didn't respond to my mother's threat at all. I just sat there quietly, phone recording every single word they said. My father tried a different angle, his tone shifting. The buyer was offering good money. We could have split it 3 ways fairly. I shook my head slowly. You weren't planning to split anything with me. Uncle Benson needed money for his failing business. That's what this was really about from the start. My mother's face flushed bright red. Who told you that information? I didn't answer her question. I simply stood up, took my phone and my deed, and walked toward the door without another word. If you contact me again about this property, I'll forward everything to the police. The forgery, the notary fraud, the seller declarations you signed under oath. All of it. My father called after me as I opened the front door. You're not the daughter we raised anymore. I turned back one final time. No. I'm the granddaughter she raised to keep promises. I left without another word. The next day, Patricia Nwosu was subpoenaed to appear at the final hearing. Jade told me she'd already hired her own lawyer and was terrified. Good, I said simply. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Jade filed for sanctions and attorney's fees against my parents for bringing a fraudulent claim and wasting court resources. When Patricia Nwosu arrived at the hearing, she looked smaller than I'd imagined from our emails. Her hands shook visibly as she took the stand. The judge asked her to explain the notarization process in detail. Patricia's voice wavered badly. Mrs. Okafor brought me a document that was already signed. She said her daughter had signed it before leaving the country and just needed it notarized quickly for the closing. The judge leaned forward, her expression stern. You didn't verify the signer's identity at all? Patricia shook her head, looking down. No, Your Honor. Mrs. Okafor said it was urgent, and I trusted her because she's been a longtime family friend for years. The judge's expression hardened even more. Did you conduct a video notarization as you claimed in your initial statement to the state board? Patricia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. No, Your Honor. I lied about that completely. There was no video at all. I just stamped it because she asked me to. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge made a note on her pad with deliberate strokes. MS. Nwosu, you are aware this is a felony offense, correct? Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, Your Honor. I know. Jade leaned over and whispered to me quietly, that's the nail in the coffin for their case. The judge ordered a recess, and we all filed out of the courtroom slowly. I saw my parents sitting on a bench in the hallway, both staring at the floor. They wouldn't look at me at all. When court resumed after lunch, Jade presented additional evidence that she'd uncovered. She had found a wire transfer from my parents' account to Uncle Benson's business that was very suspicious. The transfer was dated 3 days after the buyer's earnest money was supposed to be deposited. The timing was too convenient to be any kind of coincidence at all. The judge reviewed the bank statements Jade had subpoenaed carefully. Mr. and Mrs. Okafor, she said slowly, looking at them over her glasses, did you use anticipated proceeds from this sale to cover a debt for someone else? My father stared at the floor, refusing to answer. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again without speaking. Their attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly caught off guard. Your Honor, my clients believe the sale was legitimate and proper, he tried weakly. The judge cut him off sharply. Your clients forged a power of attorney, lied to a notary, signed false seller declarations, and misappropriated funds they didn't yet have legally. That's not a mistake or misunderstanding. That's fraud. She set down her pen and looked directly at my parents with a hard stare. I'm setting a date for final orders in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. My mother's face crumpled, tears starting to fall. My father sat frozen, like a statue. I felt no satisfaction at all, only deep exhaustion. Jade squeezed my shoulder gently as we left the courtroom. It's almost over now, she said quietly. The next morning, my mother sent me a text message. It was the first time she'd contacted me directly since the hearing. Amara, let's try family arbitration. We can work this out without more court and lawyers. I read the message twice, then opened the document I'd been working on for weeks in secret. The document was a land trust agreement. I'd consulted with an environmental attorney to draft a conservation easement that would protect the creek running through the property and the old pecan tree my grandmother had planted decades ago. The easement would make it nearly impossible for anyone to develop or sell the land in the future for commercial purposes. I replied to my mother's text with a single line. This land won't be flipped or sold. Ever. I attached the trust document for her to review. She responded an hour later, her message angry. Don't do this to us. You're being spiteful. I didn't reply at all. The final hearing arrived 2 weeks later on a cold morning. I wore a simple dress and sat beside Jade at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded. My parents sat across the aisle with their attorney, not looking in my direction. The judge entered, and we all stood respectfully. When we sat down again, the judge addressed the courtroom in a clear voice. I've reviewed all the evidence submitted, and I'm prepared to issue my final ruling. The judge spoke clearly and carefully, each word measured. The power of attorney submitted to the escrow company is void. It was forged. Any attempted conveyance of the property based on that document is void. The seller declarations signed by Mr. and Mrs. Okafor are false and were made under penalty of perjury. She paused and looked directly at my parents with a stern expression. I am imposing sanctions on both of you. Mr. and Mrs. Okafor will reimburse Ms. Amara Okafor for all reasonable attorney's fees and costs incurred in this matter. My mother's shoulders slumped forward in defeat. The judge continued without pause. Additionally, I am ordering Mr. and Mrs. Okafor to sign a stipulated judgment affirming that Ms. Amara Okafor is the sole owner of the property in question. That judgment will be recorded with the county today. Jade leaned over and whispered to me, "It's done. You won." The judge dismissed the case with a sharp bang of her gavel. My parents' attorney helped them sign the stipulated judgment at a table near the clerk's desk, both of them moving slowly. I watched from across the room, feeling strangely empty. Their signatures looked shaky and reluctant on the paper. The clerk stamped the document officially and handed me a certified copy with a smile. I folded it carefully and put it in my bag. My parents walked past me without speaking or looking up. I didn't try to stop them or say anything. 2 weeks after the judgment was recorded, I met with the environmental attorney to finalize the land trust. We named it after my grandmother, Adiz Okafor. The trust document included a conservation easement that protected the creek, the pecan tree, and the wildflower meadow that stretched along the southern edge of the property. No one could develop it, subdivide it, or sell it without the trust's approval now. I was the sole trustee with complete control. The land would remain intact and protected long after I was gone. I also signed a lease agreement with a local farming cooperative. They would use 2 acres to grow vegetables for a community garden project. In exchange for the land, the cooperative agreed to maintain the fence line and keep the property cleared of brush. I converted the old storage shed near the road into a small studio for my urban planning work. I installed new windows, added insulation, and painted the walls a soft cream color that felt peaceful. My grandmother's name was carved into a wooden sign above the door by a local craftsman. I hung it myself on a Sunday afternoon, alone, with the wind moving through the pecan branches overhead. The studio wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was mine completely. I set up a desk, a drafting table, and shelves for my books and supplies. It felt like coming home after a long journey. I didn't attend my parents' family dinner the following month. My mother sent an invitation through my aunt, expecting me to show up. I declined politely but firmly. Instead, I spent that evening at the property, walking the fence line slowly and checking on the community garden's progress. The cooperative had already planted tomatoes, peppers, and okra in neat rows. A group of children from the neighborhood were helping to water the plants carefully. I stood under the pecan tree and watched the sun set over the creek, painting the sky orange and pink. My phone buzzed with messages from family members asking why I wasn't at the dinner. I ignored them all. Later that night, I drafted an email to my parents at my desk. I attached 2 documents to the message. The first was a PDF of the recorded judgment and conservation easement with all the official stamps. The second attachment was a photo I'd taken that afternoon at the property. The pecan tree was covered in colorful ribbons tied by the children from the garden. Each ribbon had a wish written on it in marker. I hope the tomatoes grow big. I hope we can come back next year. Thank you for sharing this land with us. I typed a single sentence below the photo. This ground will feed people. That was the promise. I pressed send and turned off my phone completely. I didn't hear from my parents after that email at all. My aunt called once to say they were hurt and confused by my actions. I listened politely and said nothing in response. My cousin Ivy texted me a few weeks later with family gossip. Everyone's talking about what you did. Some people think you were too harsh on your parents. I replied simply, I kept a promise. That's all that matters. The community garden flourished throughout the summer months. By midsummer, the cooperative was harvesting vegetables twice a week and distributing them to families in the neighborhood who needed fresh food. I started hosting small workshops in my studio, teaching young planners about land use and conservation easements. My practice grew slowly but steadily, one client at a time. I worked on projects that mattered deeply to me, projects that protected green spaces and honored the people who lived on the land before us. On the anniversary of my grandmother's death, I planted a second pecan tree near the first one she'd planted. I dug the hole myself, hands in the dirt, sweat on my face under the hot sun. When I finished planting and watering it, I sat under the original tree and let the wind lift through the leaves above me. It sounded like someone exhaling deeply, like someone finally letting go of old burdens. My phone stayed face down in my bag, silent and ignored. The land was mine now, protected forever. The promise was kept. And I was finally, truly home.